afternoon, everybody, on a Wednesday, and it's a pleasure to be here on Stream On. And with me today, I've got to your right and my left, got immaculate down below Nathan, the big man, the bomber, uh, Big 12 Mafia. Nathan, good to have you with us. Guys, off the top, a friend of ours suffered, and we want to take a moment to give our thoughts and certainly our prayers to Greg Flugar, whose father passed yesterday. Greg is one of the nicest men you're ever going to meet. Truly dedicated to his family and just a really sweet guy. And we wish Nathan. Nathan, I know you know Greg better than I. He's just a really wonderful guy, and we wish he and his family, peace at this time.
Yeah, he's been caring for his both his parents for a while
Mhm.
now, and he put all things aside for them always,
Mhm.
which I have my utmost respect is for family. That's my
Mhm.
core, and so I totally respect them. And Greg, I sent you a message yesterday. I sent you a text, but please, again, condolences, and hopefully this is a bit of a respite for your family. I know there's been challenges, but we love you and
Mhm.
want nothing but success for you and your family.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, we move on
Yeah.
after that, and the headline over the past couple of days has been Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron, of course, Rodgers played 4 downs in the game on Monday night, um, and now he won't be playing this season. Now, the networks that impacts them, and it does so in this way. They scheduled the Jets for 6 national telecasts,
Right.
and that will be without the aforementioned Aaron Rodgers. What the network is now doing is trying to see if they can work around some of this. Now, the reason why, and then we can get into it, is that um, 2 of the games were Thursday night games on Amazon, and they were doing that to kind of boost the Amazon profile. Well, they'll likely, they had talked about not flexing any Thursday night games. They probably will flex a Thursday night Jets game down the line, sometime months from now, so that teams can have time to get ready for it. But our first and probably only flex of a Thursday game is going to be a Jets game later in the season at this point. But when you schedule those kind of things, and I mean, they did it for Brady when Brady went to the Buccaneers, and they've done it for others in the past. And they want their stars to be their stars, and in this particular case, unfortunately for the Jets, and if you're a long-suffering Jet fans, and I know many of them who are, this is kind of on trend for the Jets. You sign somebody, they get hurt you know, within the first couple of games that they play, and then you know. Then they just have a season just like the Jets normally do. So, anyway, the networks have to deal with that, and the Jets have to deal with the fact they don't have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
Well, and I think that the story is that he's gone, but I would say
Mhm.
the subtext to that is if anybody watched HBO's Hard Knocks,
Mhm.
Zach Wilson is a new man. Just because of the 4 weeks in
Mhm.
preseason training, and then and Aaron Rodgers believes in him. He really
Mhm.
sort of has adopted him.
Mhm.
So there's every possibility that obviously I'm a little biased because I'm a BYU fan,
Sure.
but that Zach has turned the corner. I mean, he had the fifth best rating QBR rating of the entire weekend.
Mhm.
Yeah, I threw one interception, but
Mhm.
Jared Allen threw four.
Right.
So, it's I think people need to take a step back, and the sky isn't necessarily falling. Their defense is elite. It reminds me of the Legion of Boom. And then going back to that Baltimore in
Mhm.
2000, that Baltimore team. Uh, I I wouldn't write them off. Seattle won with a quarterback that a lot of people wouldn't say is a superstar, and Russell Wilson. So I don't
Mhm.
see why the Jets can't do the same thing.
I would say I was going to actually point out the whole BYU connection, but I'm glad you brought it up with their bomber. And if I was going to make any comment at all about it, I'd say,
Mhm.
why couldn't this be similar to the Patriots moment when,
Right.
when Bledsoe went down? It's a little bit earlier in the season, but like you're saying, we do have evidence that he has kind of one hell of a mentor there who believes in him to kind of help him through
Mhm.
this. So this, in the end, might be a good thing for the Jets because this could be their future.
Right. The other part of it is that, everybody loves a story where the underdog shows up and, the backup quarterback. It's the old adage in the National Football League. Everybody loves the backup quarterback.
Right.
And, and so maybe for Zach Wilson, and we all hope so, because Zach seems to be a good dude, that, he gets the opportunity. The problem is not, and I think this is where people misunderstand what I was saying about the network. The networks are looking at the star being, being Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Star
Now,
draw.
the fact, by the way, that the Jets just happened to win the game the other night, is at times gets lost in the headlines.
Right.
That they outplayed Josh Allen and they beat the they went on and to beat the Buffalo Bills. So that was an entertaining game from that standpoint. And who's to know that as things go forward, that the Jets don't do as well as they might have done had Aaron Rodgers, or for that matter, perhaps even better than what Aaron Rodgers, because Zach has mobility that Aaron didn't, and so there are
Right.
things he brings to the party that Aaron didn't. But the network, regardless of that, is going to be very cautious as to where they go, and that's a pretty stacked division this season. With Buffalo obviously is the favorite, but I wouldn't sleep on Miami. They've got speed to burn, and they had one of the highest rated games and possibly the most entertaining game of the weekend with the Chargers out there. So the numbers that CBS got on that game were very good, because people love to watch scoring, and those two teams just lit it up. And this Miami team might be the fastest team since the Cardinals team that they used to call the fastest team on turf. So
Right.
we'll see, but it's going to be entertaining, and we'll see how that goes. Number one and number two Nielsen rated shows, which seems to be usually the way it works. Only this time it was the Thursday night game that got the top billing in the Sunday night game, which also took place at MetLife Stadium.
Right.
Was a bit of a dog. It's a 40-0 shellacking that Dallas put on Dallas put on the Detroit. I'm sorry, the Giants, and then Detroit beating Kansas City in the opener on Thursday night. So those two games are 1 and 2, and normally what happens in the NFL, they get the number 1 and number 2 shows because of it's appointment viewing. And right now in television, there isn't much that's appointment viewing. It's either sports or it's news.
Yep.
Everything else you can watch whenever you want, and prime time is whenever you want it to be. So the appointment viewing with the NFL has really been good.
Do you think that the networks, like right now, they might view that as a bad thing, but if say the Jets go on winning and continue winning, does that actually maybe possibly become an even bigger story and even better ratings?
Yeah, it could. And the thing is that to your point, the networks, once they place that schedule, set it up, it makes it very difficult, even if they wanted to change it. The only reason they could do the change on the Thursday night is they have written in a flex situation. If they didn't have that flex situation for Thursday night, then the Jets schedule wouldn't change at all. So from that standpoint, I don't think the network is as concerned about the wins and losses of the Jets as much as the amount of money they were spending on promoting the concept of Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. And so that part of it, that, as you said, as both of you said, this has the opportunity to play out in more of a fairy tale like situation, and if that goes, then people love love the underdog and love the opportunity to see a guy who. I mean, look at what happened. We talked about New England. How many people
Yep.
knew who Matt Castle was,
Right.
or Jimmy G was,
Right.
before. And what happened was that we now know, and it all fit in, and Brady was on the sidelines cheering him on. And now you have Aaron on the sidelines cheering on Zach. So
There is a
So
risk
that'll be
to it,
good.
though. So
Oh yeah, there's always a risk. Here's the thing that was very interesting to me, and that is the phenomenon that is known as Deion Sanders. And Deion and Coach Prime
it continues.
this week. All right, this week, both Game Day with ESPN and Fox Big Saturday will be on campus at Colorado.
Has that ever happened before, by the way?
Both of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has happened. It was
Okay.
Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, and I think another one was another Texas Alabama game or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that.
But they're huge games. Like this
Yes,
is Colorado
yeah,
versus
this-
Colorado
Colorado
State.
State.
Right.
And let's go one step further. It's the Pac-12 after dark game. So
It's nowhere
they're
even
gonna
near
be
the
there at
morning.
noon. They're going to be there at noon, which is 10 o'clock in the morning in Boulder.
Yep.
For a game that's not going to start until till after 10
Right.
o'clock. So,
And the
I
big
don't know
noon-
where the students are going to be, but I'm sure they'll find a way to get there. Lou DeMello, who was one of the guys from Fox, I exchanged emails with him today, and I said, "How close are you going to be to Fowler? To the gang over on on the game day set?" He goes, "I think we're looking at different places on campus, so we don't have to be that close to each other."
You
I
know,
would think.
you know how good it would be though if, like, in the background of one, you could see the set for the other
Right,
one
for the other
on
one.
the
Yeah.
opposite end of the field. That'd be so great.
Remember, you could. That's kind of like watching that's like kind of like watching a political convention where they take the band the shot and they say, "Here's CNN, here's NBC, here's CBS, and ABC."
It would.
So it could very well be that they could just like bump into each other.
Jim, so I got a question
yeah,
for you.
sure.
You've seen these sort of patterns over the years repeat
Mm-hmm.
themselves through different things that are
Mhm.
the same. The thing that I have a question about is if Colorado goes out and lays a stinker in the next 2
Mhm.
weeks, and they're 3-1 or heaven forbid 2-2, does this pressure sort of dissipate? Does the everybody clamoring to be covering Colorado games sort of subside if that happens?
It depends on how it happens, right? If they go out and they just can't find their way anymore,
Right.
then yeah. I mean, look, this game. If I were a handicapper, which thank goodness I'm not, you look at this game and it's a classic trap game because
It is.
Colorado State's always plays Colorado tough, and it doesn't matter how
Yep.
good Colorado was. Even when Colorado was, really good back in the Cordell Stewart times,
Right.
Colorado State gave them fits. So, if you're Colorado State, you got all day, man. You come over on Friday night, you hear nothing but, how good Colorado is, how wonderful this whole situation is. And basically you're just playing the dummy in the show, right? You're just like a
Right.
banana all the way down the line. You didn't come over there for that to happen. I mean, you're not driving, as Coach McKay used to say, both teams are on scholarship. So,
Right.
they're going to show up, and if they don't win another game this season, you got to believe that Colorado State wants to win this one. So, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how that goes. There hasn't really been, Deion's a unicorn. Okay.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
he's a personality. His coaching abilities, which people suspected when he went to Jackson State, he transferred them to Colorado. Everybody was like, what's going to be like Colorado? It's going to be a nutty situation. It's just not going to work. Well, 2 games, it works. Okay. They had they have a 7 rating in the first game, which was one of the highest ratings that they've had on Big Saturday, the noon show on Fox. They literally broke their Pac-12 record in ratings with an 8-3 this week with the
Right.
game against Baylor. I'm sorry, not Baylor. What am I talking about? Against
Nebraska.
against Nebraska.
Yep.
So there you go. I mean, you literally are seeing it, and part of it is Deion attracts the casual fan.
Sure.
I mean, the football fan, there's a lot of traffic at noon, right? There's probably 7-8 games at noon you can watch. They meaning the audience, chose to watch that game primarily, one would assume, because of Deion Sanders. So
Right.
in a way, it brings the casual fan, which is a good thing.
That's what they've been
And
looking for.
it
Yep.
also brings, attention to, the university. But the downside, and I'm not saying it's totally a downside, is it elevates Deion to a level that, puts him in the same, obviously it's kind of funny that they're doing commercials together with Saban, in so much as coaches don't draw crowds. Okay.
Not normally.
In basketball, yeah, you want, if Krzyzewski's coaching, you may watch, a Duke game because, Coach K, is coaching. Or if there's, a character type coach guy who's, Rolly Massimino and some of the old guys from the Big East days when, you never knew what was going to happen. They were hilarious to listen to and to talk about, but, the story was still the game. Deion transcends that. And to a great extent, why is because of his social media presence. I mean, he's on Instagram, he's on Twitter, and he's in commercials. He's everywhere. You expect a Deion to be, but you didn't expect Deion to be a coach and a mentor and that sort of thing. And that's where this is different. There has not been a superstar athlete, even Michael Jordan, when Michael left the game, or Larry Bird when Larry left the game, and they got into the front office work. Okay, it never translated for them. It has translated tremendously for Deion.
Yep. Elite athletes don't often become coaches.
No, or if they do, they don't become good coaches.
No.
He's different though, right? Deion's
Oh, yeah.
always been wired different.
Mhm.
His faith is extremely strong. He is his family. He's raised in a religious household. All of his kids,
Mhm.
and I'm a pretty strong faith believer in
Mhm.
the school I cover, and I think that is an additional hook. You might have casual fans now paying
Sure.
attention because of his faith that wouldn't normally even watch a football game, let alone Colorado, who's been in the dumps for a decade or more.
Right.
So it's very multifaceted. It's not just wins and losses, which is
Right.
why I asked the question, do you think it would fall off or not?
Well, to that point, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick, wanted to add on to that. My thoughts on why he's finding success, though, actually the real success part of it is less to do with himself and more to do with as big as much as he talks about himself. I don't actually think he has a large ego in terms of thinking he does it all, because his coaching staff is excellent. He has amassed himself one hell of a coaching staff. He's got an offensive coordinator that could be a head coach at a power conference school easily, but he's chosen to be there with him. So he really seems to have his head on straight in terms of how to actually do this.
Guys, back many years ago, I produced the Jerry Glanville show. Deion played on the Falcons at that point in time and played for the Braves.
Right.
And that was the year, by the way, that he played an afternoon game with the Braves and a night game with the Falcons on the same day.
Yeah.
Well, one of the segments on the Glanville show, I would give a player a camera and say, "Look, just go. Give me a week in your life. Just shoot whatever you could get. Bring it back. We'll edit it. And we'll use it on the show." And I specifically saved the final show for Deion for Christmas. I figured, okay, let's see how Deion handles. And first of all, he couldn't have been more gracious. He was easy to deal with. Deion's always been easy to deal with. And he just asked me, so what do you want? And I said, I want what you want. You go and do it. Do whatever.
Right.
Do whatever you want. And Spielberg couldn't have put together a better movie than he did. And it just kept showing, and it was clever, it was funny, it was not over the top, it was just a very well produced, video. And you at the, and he was still playing at that time. And you're sitting there going, this guy is just different. He is a star, but he understands why he's a star and what makes it, makes him relatable to people. Never once did I ever see Deion not sign an autograph.
Right.
Never saw him not take a picture with somebody.
Yep.
Never saw, I mean, no matter how tired he was, no matter how, whether the game was a good game or a bad game or whatever, that was never a Deion thing. Deion was such an incredibly people person. The only thing that I have a little, and to your point on the faith aspect of it, that reminds me a great deal of Tim Tebow.
Sure.
Tim, you couldn't ask for a better, nicer person than Tim.
Absolutely.
But I could do this, guys. I could sit down at the keyboard. I could write a story about Tim. Didn't matter what it was about. I could punch, post it, go through the editors. I'd push it to the editors for 10 minutes. And then it would pop up. And I could go and have a sandwich while I'm, while that's the editors are working on it, and come back and see that I had 7,000 reads of a story that I wrote 10 minutes ago on Tim Tebow.
Wow.
He generated that kind of buzz. The interesting part with Tim was the buzz was like you either loved him or you disliked him. And I don't know why you would dislike him, but there were people who did. And there's still people who are, who they don't, Tim's not on as much, he's on TV occasionally, but for whatever reason, Tim didn't connect like Deion connects. And I think that Deion is that package that he understands the importance of selling himself, but he does it in a more palatable way where people, he doesn't mind poking fun at himself. And I think that's probably a big key to this. But there's one other thing, and you brought it up, Mackie, about the coaches that he surrounded himself with. Mm-hmm. If he can bring on guys like Michael Irvin and others who have that same sort of persona that Deion has, that's going to be huge for not only the importance of diversification and getting more Black coaches into the sport, but it's going to be extremely helpful to bring on, the type of kids that Deion wants and that other coaches want on their team. And I think that's it. When he cleared the house, it wasn't because he didn't think that the guys at Colorado could play football. It was because he didn't think that the guys that were on that roster could play the kind of football he wanted.
Right.
And there's a big difference.
Yep. And to your point, all these guys he's bringing in there who are interested in this, it changes the game for those guys as well, because I don't think that these type of star athletes ever saw coaching as a way in which they could, I guess you say, improve themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're seeing with Deion how you can be a head coach at a school like this and continue to build your own brand, if you're looking at yourself as kind of like a business and how you approach it. I think for these guys, they're seeing, hey, we could go that route too. And it's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding. So,
I think that the game. Yeah. And I think the way that what's gone on television, and it's a good thing, is they haven't, when the game is on, they don't focus on Deion. Right. They focus on what's going on the field. Yeah. And that's, Gus Johnson has had the last 2 calls with Joe Clark. And Gus is a wonderfully effusive fellow. I mean, one of the good things about Gus is you don't have to worry about when whether he's excited or not. Gus gives you that. he gives you that. And so I think that the combination of having Gus and that whole group around is really interesting. The dynamic that is curious to me, and I'm wondering how this is going to play out, is how is he perceived by other coaches? You can tell when Urban Meyer is on that set and they start talking about Deion, there's a little bit of frostiness on Urban there, and he's not, I'm not saying that he's not complimentary to what Deion is doing, but you can see that it's like, this is not. I would never. He hasn't come out and said I'm not. I would never coach this way or whatever. But you can see that the old style coaches are looking at him and going, if this guy breaks through, we are so screwed, because this is where people are going to want to go to play. Nobody in their right mind, if it's a choice between Deion and Deion is winning and it's Urban Meyer winning, they're going to Deion. Okay, that's not. Don't even think about going the Urban Meyer route. So the my way or highway, which actually was something that Deion did in his own way, was done in such a whole different way than what Urban did. And I think that coaches are going to look at that and go, eek, if this is the new way of doing things, he's changing how we do things.
Well, go ahead, buddy.
I was just gonna say at the end of the day, the proof is going to be in the pudding. We know for a fact that high recruiting classes is no guarantee of wins. Looking at Texas A&M,
Florida,
and
Jimbo Fisher,
and Florida this season, right? Florida's way underachieving. So leadership comes in different forms. It's not just, hey, I can talk to you as a college student or even as a high school student, come to my college. It's completely different. And so I really think that we just sort of need to reset our paradigms when we're talking about who there needs to be more minority coaches in football. It's a travesty that there aren't 1,000 more. And so if it helps at all for those coaches to break through and get a little more notice where they weren't before, I think the Deion experiment will absolutely work. The one question that I think we all need to think about is what happens when the SEC, and I'm looking at Florida here, comes calling? Or what happens when Dallas fires, eventually they're going to fire, what's his name? And he comes hat in hand. Jones comes in and says, hey, I'll give you my Cowboys. Let's roll. I think those are real challenges for Colorado.
Well, yeah. I think that a couple of things that we have to take into consideration. Deion's a businessman. Colorado gave him an opportunity. I think he will appreciate that opportunity.
Sure.
And so, I think he'll be loyal to them, but he'll also be understanding that there's probably 4 or 5 jobs that Deion would want. Okay. And I think that's the key. What does Deion want?
Right.
We're dealing with someone here who doesn't need the money, and money doesn't mean as much to him as it would to another coach. He doesn't have to have that $100 million contract that Jimbo Fisher had to have at Texas A&M.
Right.
So I think he can be a little bit more selective of what job that he wants. And so chasing another job, I don't think is going to be as important to Deion at the moment until he proves that he feels that he can be on the same level from a standpoint of coaching and winning championships as some of the folks that he admires. And I know that he and Nick Saban are close.
Right.
And I know that they've had a number of conversations. Him and Jimmy Johnson are close. I mean, from they were at Dallas together. So he's got a lot of coaches who he can reach out to. So it is a different thing, but if one of those jobs, and I don't know what the job would be that he, maybe, as I said, half a dozen jobs that he would want, shows up, as long as he created created something that Colorado could carry on with,
Right.
I think he'd be cool with leaving. I don't think Deion's the kind of guy who's going to leave Colorado and move on to the next job and just leave them in the lurch for wondering what comes next. You're not going to replace him with someone else that is going to have the charisma that he has, but they're going to certainly be able to take one of, and this goes back to your assistants about how many assistants he has. It's going to probably be one of those assistants where you've got somebody who knows that whole situation, and it's a good thing. But right now we're along for the ride, and I'm thinking that ride's going to be at least a 4-year ride for Deion.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think he's going to go anywhere else for the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say on the first point, real quick, in terms of the other coaches,
Sure.
I don't. I think it's great the opportunity he provides and could provide for others. I don't think that there's so much a racial element to this as there is how much of a red carpet was rolled out for him to go to Colorado. They changed credit transfer policies for him so that he could bring his boys in.
Sure.
His daughter, I don't know if people realize that, she's an athletic scholarship player on their basketball team. So, and I personally think he had a lot to say in they're moving to the Big 12. So it threw off a lot of maybe long-term plans that the conferences and everyone might have wanted to do. So he's really been a disruptor. Right. And I think that's the biggest part about it is just how much he's just kind of disrupted things in a good way. But in terms of the coaching situation there and him saying, I don't think he goes anywhere. Why would he? He's got the number one recruit, quarterback rated recruit out of Michigan now looking to come to him. He's not going to need to go anywhere to get anything. I don't see Colorado not paying him whatever he wants. The ticket prices now to go there are getting to be insane. They're going to have the money. So, but if he does, I think, like you're saying, he stays there for a little while and then maybe his foot problems and whatnot. But I think they have the coach heir apparent already there and their offensive coordinator. So I think it's pretty much all set.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's no reason why. And the other thing it does, if you're a Big 12 fan, is it now, Texas and Oklahoma are out the door. It automatically puts a team in there that that gives you a high level of interest. And I think, I have argued from a television standpoint that balance is good, stability is good, but there wasn't a team in the Big 12. We talked about BYU being name-wise that the team,
right?
But the team that you can look at and say, well, you know what? Maybe that's our team that's going to be our ticket to a national championship, or at least a consistent winner. And Deion has the ability, and Colorado has the ability to transform themselves into, when they move to the new Big 12, along with Utah, along with BYU and some others, to really be a power in the conference. And I think that helps because parity's good. There's no question about that. But parity doesn't move the TV needle.
Right.
Yeah.
And Deion will help move that needle. Now, what does that do? That does, if you are BYU and you are out there doing, not that BYU needs Deion to make this happen, because they have their own good fan base. But what it does do is, it amps up every time they play.
Yes.
And so if you beat them, if Utah comes out and comes over and beats them, and then it begins to focus people on the teams in the conference. And that's not a bad thing either. And it focuses TV, because, to be honest, TV's understanding of the Big 12 conference has never been good. And where to put them and how to market them. They've screwed that up on a consistent basis for years. And one would hope that this will be the catalyst for them getting it right. And they've undersold a number of these. I mean, largely because Texas and Oklahoma has taken up all the oxygen.
Right.
So many years. So if that's the case, and Texas and Oklahoma are no longer there, well, then the oxygen, is there for others to use.
An
And I think that,
opportunity.
this is where you suddenly start to see, okay, we got a fun conference. These teams are good. Dion is there, and let's have some fun with it. So absolutely. There we go. Terrence, if you always remember, very few east of New Mexico. I would disagree with that. Having seen 47,000 fans at Raymond James Stadium to see a University of South Florida BYU game, and most of them wearing blue and white, I really think that that's not necessarily the case. But Terrence, I know that I think BYU is not a small brand, and I can only say that from when we were putting together television games, for late games, we always went to BYU because we knew that they would have games on, and we would program them because BYU had a good football team during the time, and they were always entertaining, and the time slot was perfect for us. So BYU has a national. Are they Notre Dame? No, they're not Notre Dame. But do they have a national footprint? They do. They do. And people show up all over the country to watch BYU play football.
I think the Big 12 might be surprised with how well they travel.
Well, that I think will be good. Jerry's here. Hey, Jerry. Jerry thinks Terrence hit the nail on that. Okay.
I think Jerry was also talking about Terrence had some questions earlier as well while we were.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
we were waxing on.
Yeah.
Jerry goes, I meant to his earlier ACC possible expansion. Let me change questions here. Okay. Do me a favor, Terrence. What was the point of? Can you see? I can't even see where the question was about the.
Yeah,
ACC.
I can read it off if you like.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Do you guys expect ESPN/ACC to be aggressive in 2030 in order to keep FSU Clemson from bolting? Might we see ESPN/ACC poaching the top brands from the Big 10 and Big 12? And it continues on, but that's the first question.
I would say ESPN does not. Let me backtrack this one a little bit, and then then you guys jump in, take whatever you want.
Here,
I don't think Clemson and FSU want to leave the ACC. Okay. FSU had the chance to leave the ACC and join the SEC in 1994, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it because they felt if they left the ACC and went to the SEC, their chances of trying to make it to the championship would be greatly diminished. So they stayed in the ACC. I think that Clemson and Florida State, if they can get a number, and I don't know what that number is at this point, would stay. And there would be no reason for them to leave. But I think all of that has to be addressed after the contract, or the 2036 contract is either changed in some way or another, or that they can figure out how to break a grant of rights, which is not going to be simple.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated situation. I think Florida State does because they want to keep up with their peers in terms of money. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you in that I don't think that their primary desire would be to the SEC. It would be to the Big 10. During the Board of Trustees meeting, they kept talking about research this and research numbers that, and 5 years till AAU. So I think that as an institution, they would like to get in with the Big 10 now that it's kind of going nationwide. In terms of the ACC poaching from the Big 10, they would have to get a payout that is much higher because, one, every Big 10 school is a invested partner in the Big 10 network. Mm-hmm. So there's a buy of that. Also, the agreements in the Big Ten Academic Alliance. It's more than just a sports conference. So I'd say it'd be very hard to do that. In terms of the Big 12, right now the Big 12 seems to have a lot of cohesion. And the ACC kind of doesn't, but who knows what the reality is on the inside. So I tend to say probably not. But, it's going to be a fight going forward.
Yeah, the one thing that I think the ACC Big 12 situation, there's fits and there's not fits. Louisville for point. Louisville would be a fit in the Big 12. But some of these teams would not be fits. And so I don't think, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, they're going to cannibalize each other. Well, I really don't see that happening. I see that that the ACC is going to try to stay as close together as they possibly can. And at the end of the day, what we may see, and this is something by 2030, we may see, and because there's so many lawsuits and so many other things that are factored into this. And we're now again talking from the TV network standpoint. Maybe what the TV network says is, you know what, let's actually just have a football only conference and figure out how that works. Because I can tell you right now, there are people in athletic departments all over the country screaming from the Olympic sports side, you've got to be kidding me. We do not want to go from, Los Angeles to Piscataway, New Jersey to play a softball game. We don't want to go from, West Lafayette, Indiana to, to Seattle for volleyball. I mean, it makes no sense. Regionally, the Olympic sports and the basketball should have stayed regional, and they should have decided to build a conference of football. That's what they should have done. They didn't do that, but there's still time for that to happen. And I really think that's where it's going, because I just think that when they start paying these kids, I mean, I know that we're seeing the money coming in from the NIL, but I do think that we're not that far away from them being paid to be members of the university. And when that happens, it's going to be nightmarish on how they're going to straighten that part of it out.
I think they'll do Olympic sports scheduling alliances between conferences. I think
they have to.
I think that'll be the end result. I don't think that they're going to, some of these conferences, they're not going to want to form up different conferences and all that. I know that's the talking points going now, but I think the end result is scheduling alliances between conferences.
They have to. I mean, you can't be traipsing people all over the country, because they don't fly, a private,
not everyone's like
jets.
BYU and Bomber can attest to this. They've had this figured out for a long time. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why BYU is picked up by the Big 12 so quickly is like, hey, how do you do this?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, what's driving everything is money, as we all know, and any other way that they can increase ad revenue, increase reach, broaden their customer base, they're going to do that. So while these scheduling alliances, I think, have to happen, Big 12 and Big 10 are currently working on one right now. I think that's essential for day-to-day operations. As far as the conferences go, though, until the day comes when college football is blown up, and I don't see that happening on a 10 or 15-year horizon. Maybe it's sooner, but until that happens, I think you're still going to be dealing with these conferences that are going to be going coast to coast. Of all the ridiculous ones that go coast to coast, the one that's the most ridiculous is the ACC. There's absolutely no logical reason for them to bring in those schools, except for they wanted the short-term payout. And Florida State and Clemson, even if they left tomorrow, are going to get some of that money because they're paying it up front. And so I don't know. I'd love to stick with the regionality stuff, but anymore, it's just I just don't think it's practical.
That leads into Terrence's other question, if you want it there, Jim.
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you guys believe ESPN ACC will leave Stanford, Cal, and SMU alone on an island?
For now, I believe so.
I'm sorry. That
They're kind
they'll
of
leave.
out on an island, basically.
Well,
Kind of like
there's no one else
they're
to
out on
go
their
and
own.
get.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the problem. It's not that they want to leave them on an island. It's like who do you go and bring in that's going to give you? I mean, the grant of rights and the TV deal. The TV deal only pays Power 5 teams. So if they add Power 5 teams, then there's more mouths to feed. That's not going to make happy Clemson and FSU happy.
Right.
So that's not going to go. I don't see any other teams out there. I will tell you this. This is what kind of flummoxed me a bit. And that was I didn't see why Stanford and Cal, who had an opportunity to rebuild the pack in more of a, they could have had the schools like Rice and they could have had Tulane. They could have had an Ivy-ish type league
Right.
of their own. They could have run the league and they could have just stayed the pack. And I honestly think they could very well have held on to that Power 5 distinction because Stanford and Cal have that much juice. They could do it. And I think they could do it. Why they rushed off and went to the ACC, I still don't get. It just doesn't make any sense to me. They could have stayed back and been kingmakers. They didn't. And now they're just, moving across country to play.
If I may on that, I think you're right. I absolutely think you're right. And I think that if there is a conference for them to do that with, it's actually not the PAC, it's the ACC. The ACC has more of that in it than the PAC did. That has their buddies Duke in it. Like that Duke Stanford connection, people understand that is a real connection.
Yep.
And to have them both in there, people might be surprised and shocked if they were to find out down the road that Stanford and Duke actually don't mind if some of these big public schools leave. And if they can try to maybe form up something different. Because the problem right now that we're seeing is that we have too many conferences trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to create the same concept, and it's led to the Big Ten and SEC pulling away. So, and now we see something different with the Big 12, which is kind of this new idea of, we're not going to have a major brand carrying the way, but our parity and our competition between them is going to give you a different product. And that's what I think the ACC could do in the future if they have these departures, is you create an entirely different product for an entirely different subset of viewers. I would think it would be the perfect conference for like Apple to come in and want to be part of.
But does the conference have viability if you lose your top 7?
They're not losing their top 7.
What do you consider to be viable, though?
I think if the main schools go to the SEC and the Big Ten, you're going to be left with what basically essentially is the Pac-12 turned into. You didn't have enough star power to keep that thing together. So in my opinion, once it starts to break up, you're going to have people looking for a different home that is higher profile. And I'm looking at you, Louisville, looking at NC State, I'm losing at Virginia Tech. And if the conference loses those bigger brands, the conference may stay alive. There might be 7 or 8 teams now that you have the Pac-12 and the SEC, the AAC refugees, and they can put a conference together, but it won't be on the same level that the Big 12 and the other two.
I would disagree. I would disagree from that same. And again, it's not that I don't. You still have Syracuse. You still have Pitt. You still have
no. Pitt's going to the Big 12.
Not anybody I know from Pitt.
I think that those numbers, once they're stark and they see the difference in money, the decision will be made for them. That's my opinion, not obviously God's awful truth.
Well, look at this. I think the three of us, even though we should be running this sport, we don't necessarily. When I say something, trust me, it's not etched in stone somewhere. It's just my personal opinion, and I just. The thing that I've seen, and having been around this for more years than I care to count, the Syracuse, Pitt, these brands have a lot more in common with a Duke and a Syracuse and a Cal than they do with a Louisville and the Big 12. And I just think, we were talking about research university. We're talking about, they have a chance to do the Ivy League-ish stuff. Virginia, I mean, if they can stay together,
What if Notre Dame stays?
And Notre Dame, Notre Dame's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think that they can form a conference that would continue, that they would be comfortable with, that would give them enough money, that they would continue to move on, and that would just still keep another fourth conference. And I don't think that they're going to rush to go, oh my goodness, let's rush to the Big 12 or let's rush, somewhere else. I do see Louisville, North Carolina State. Then does that make sense? Of course it makes sense. They have different things they want to get into. It's not, and this is where I think some people get upset, and I don't want to upset anybody. It's not that I look down on or they look down on the Big 12. It's who do we like to, to be with and comfortable with, and we're comfortable with this group. Syracuse and Pitt have been together, and Boston College. Those schools have been together now for, since the early 70s, and they've worked together. There's DNA there.
Yep.
But Jim, if that was the case, the Pac-12 would still be around. The same things you're mentioning, the same thinking, the same educational standards, the same rate research. If all that was true and it didn't have anything to do with media exposure and money, the Pac-12 would be alive and thriving today.
Well, if John Swofford, but if John Swofford was the head of the Pac-12, they would be the Pac-16 today.
But that didn't happen.
No, so what I'm saying is we're really talking about what happened at the Pac-12 is stupid leadership. I mean, that's what happened in Pac-12.
What leads you to believe that's the case? Because Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami have all expressed interest about being in the Big Ten or the SEC.
Is the question though really who leaves, or is it really what opportunities are going to be there for left? And what I would say for those who remain is this the same opportunity that the Big 12 is now having, where you don't have this top-dominated conference anymore. It provides more opportunity for everyone else. And in that type of an ACC, a school like an Stanford or a Duke, look at Duke playing now. Look at Stanford's recruit numbers are great. Their NIL is through the roof. So I think it provides an opportunity for them that they have a hard time in these conferences that they've been in currently.
The other thing is, if you look at the Big Ten, they've gone strategically. I don't think could they onboard FSU and how many other schools? I don't know, maybe 2.
I'd just go Florida State and Miami. If you have full choice, I would just go hard in Florida and that's it.
Well, and they like Georgia Tech.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. There's maybe North Carolina goes to the Southeastern Conference. I don't know. But maybe not. I mean, the thing is, you have to have a dance partner that wants to dance with you.
Yeah.
And no one I've spoken to at the Big Ten has uttered any interest in Florida State at all. Zip. They see the value, but they're in a position. The Big Ten specifically is in a position where they don't need to add more. They can, but will it add any more money? And that's the TV aspect. We now are going to see that we probably are at the top of the budget we may never see a contract that the size of the deal that the Big Ten just did.
Right.
Okay. So if that's the case, that means, all right, so how much money would then ESPN, Disney, or by that time, ESPN / Apple / fill in the blank streamer have to come up with to keep to keep these two happy, Clemson and FSU. So I think that's, some of it as well. It's, this one was a one-off, and it was good for the teams that did it when they did. But I don't know that down the road, moving 3 or onboarding 3 or 4 to the Big Ten or 3 or 4 to the Southeastern Conference is even going to come close to happening. And I think that with the SEC specifically, and then I'll shut up and let you
No, you're good. You're good.
is that the SEC loves the fact that they're in that footprint. They have not left that footprint. They're not going to leave that footprint. And Greg Stanke will tell you, and with a straight face, okay, we're good with 50 million. We'll probably figure out a way to push it up to 60. Okay. But that's okay. We don't have to make the money that the Big Ten makes. We don't have to. As long as because they're doing look, they're winning championships. They're making money. They're doing fine. They don't care. They're fine. They're happy. They don't even, they're not even, if they play, they play night games anyway. It's hot down there. So they don't have any problem not playing night games. So
they're a regional conference that sells nationally. Yep.
Right. Exactly. They're cool with that. The Big Ten just wanted to be the national conference.
Yep.
Okay. And they got it. Okay. They got what they wanted. Now, so that brings us to 2030, which would be the next Big Ten contract and the next SEC contract. So why am I'm asking you and the gang out there questions I should be paying attention to. Why would I, if I'm the Big Ten, how many people do I need to add? I got the coasts. I got the East Coast. I got the West Coast. Okay. I could go south and get Miami if I wanted to, I guess, and Georgia Tech or North Carolina. Do I really want, I don't want Clemson. That's for damn sure. I know that's not going to happen. Do I want Florida State? Really? Do I need them? I mean, Florida State's making a case for themselves. Okay,
of course.
They're not making a state. They're not doing this because
this is what they want. Right.
Right. It's what they want. I want a Ferrari. Am I going to get it? No.
Well, I think they're not doing it in a vacuum, though. They have to have had people reach out to them, and give them some indication that it would be worth some of these big ideas, $500 million or leveraging with the PIF fund in Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, there had
maybe
to be
the Saudis will have a league. Maybe that's
maybe they'll buy the SEC. Who knows?
Right. You never
My
know.
only point is that I think all these things are still in flux. I don't think everything is calcified again. I think it's still, and you mentioned 30-31, Jim. I actually think the 2026 date is more important. The college football playoff, the way that they put it together, does it expand to 16 teams? I think that's really what is going to drive whatever happens next. I think it's 2-3 years. You have 40 years experience, so I'm not going to disagree with you and tell you you're wrong. I'm just saying
I haven't been wrong. I haven't been right all the time. That's for sure.
Well, yeah.
And Terrence has the interesting point that he thinks that the PAC, the 4 schools that moved over from the PAC to the Big 12 could be coerced into or convinced into moving over to the ACC.
Absolutely.
Anything is possible.
Yep.
I mean,
agree with that.
Anything is possible at this point. And Florida State to the Big Ten, it could be. It could absolutely be. I don't know. Go ahead.
What I think is pushing this, and I'm not going to go into like which schools where, because everyone should be able to have fun with that and going over different scenarios. I don't want to like step on anyone's scenarios, but what I look at in the future, which pushes growth, we know that the regular season is supply heavy. There's no more money in it. There's just not. Everyone's stripped into the very bare bones to try to get what they did in order to finish up with the pack. Where the money is all at is in the postseason. So when people think about this, they think about it moving to a 16 game. That's the common thought, and that might be what they do, but that's not increasing the number of games that much, and it certainly isn't going to meet the demand. As we see more networks moving more heavily into college football, we have streaming platforms moving into it. There's a lot of demand. So what
Mhm.
I'm looking at is a solution, as Bomber says, for 2026. I think that's the
Mhm.
target time. That's why we're seeing this push from FSU.
Mhm.
I think people behind the scenes know this. I don't think that the playoff as we know it now is going to be anything like it. In fact, what I've been positing to people to think about is the actual playoff that we know it getting smaller. And what we end up moving to are conference playoffs. Because then the conferences get of the big conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to control more of the money.
Mhm.
If you're SEC fans, most of them don't even care about the national tournament anyways. If you were to tell them that 12 teams are going to be from the SEC, they'd be happy. They'd be happy. And the Big Ten's moving to a national footprint. So all of a sudden now, if you're filling out your own conference playoffs with, say, 6 teams, it's going to be a national playoff. So, and so is the Big 12. So I think that something like that doesn't have to be that. That's
Mhm.
going to be what we see happen in 2026. And if that's the case, that's a whole lot more money coming in that could pay for more moves.
Well, the other part that you're talking about, which might make sense, and again, both you guys have talked about it. It's more along the March Madness concept, right? So you end up with your conference tournament, and then the winner of the conference tournament goes off and plays
A
in
national
the
championship
national
playoff.
championship, and it's a Final Four.
Mhm. Yep.
And it's a much
100%.
it's a
Exactly.
it's a better way to get money into that package. And then do you really that's when you really want the competitive teams. You have to have the competitive teams.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
if you're trying to sell a conference playoff, you need to have a compelling product.
Mhm.
And that's where I like this idea of the Big Ten being this big time national one, the SEC being that regional area, the Big 12 being an ultra competitive national conference that you just don't know who's going to be there from year to year. And then maybe the ACC becoming this hyper elite private university type
Mhm.
of conference, which is something brand new that's different from everyone else's and isn't trying to be what
Mhm.
other people are trying to be. That
Right.
could also be interesting for a lot of people because
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that go to private universities across this country, and they're clearly not discriminating. I mean, they got SMU coming in there, so that
Mhm.
it's going to be a pretty wide range of private type universities.
Sure. Terrence, will we see someday college football version of the NFL Sunday Ticket? I wouldn't be surprised. And
Mm.
they actually have kind of a red zone thing now. ESPN has um I forget what they call it, but Terrence, at least I get it. You can watch, and they have it is they flip from games to games. Most of the games that they flip to are the games that ESPN have, but they do. I have seen them go to Fox from time to time, but yeah, they do live cut-ins, kind of like that. But sure, I could see that. It makes sense. It
CFP
absolutely
is
makes sense.
run by an LLC, so that
Yeah,
it could spawn from that.
yeah. Well, that's an interesting thought.
I hadn't
You
actually
could have
thought
just
about that.
you could have
Like,
just said it. Yes.
I just wanted that there for him so that
Oh, for him,
I
okay.
didn't want to cut it. I was just like so that
'Cause
people could see it. But
it's funny because when I clicked on it and I looked up, I go,
yeah,
"Wait a minute, you're sitting
I,
right here."
I do that to Bomber too on this show because I come from like the chat areas and hanging
Yeah,
out there. So
okay.
sometimes I'm doing both
That
because
makes
I
sense.
don't like to cut in when you guys are talking.
That's okay. So, no, look, Bomber, I think you're right that there's that that this will be sooner as opposed to later. And I'm just my thing is I don't know that people other than the ones who are loud about it want to jump and move because
Right. I
it's
understand.
there you are burning. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, there are people left over from the Big East who do not talk to each other
Right.
from all those years back
Yeah.
because they will never forgive John Swafford for what he did
Sure.
and what went on and what got. And boy, I'll tell you, if there's a group of people who got the shaft in that deal, it had to be West Virginia. I mean, that was what happened with West Virginia was absolutely
That was a slow dissection
devastating.
of a conference. That was like 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. He just slowly tore apart that conference.
I will tell you that you don't know how close. You don't know how close. Remember when Larry Scott had almost pulled off the taking Texas and
Right.
Texas, the whole group, the four
Yep.
over. You don't know how close the Big East came to having Kansas. Missouri had not left the Big 12 at that point. BYU, I mean, all of those schools were headed to the Big East,
Right.
and it was going to happen until it didn't.
Right.
And John Skipper decided to capitulate with Texas and give them their own network, and the rest is, as they say, history. And John will forever be tied to that.
Right. You say that with
yeah.
angst in your voice there.
Well, I mean, in fairness,
Right.
John knows it, so
No, I
doesn't
got
need.
you.
But it didn't do. But yeah, you're right. It was a dissection of a conference.
Yeah, it was. And that's why I think why people are kind of fearful of doing that now is because of that example. And, at the time, people weren't as legally ready to challenge it, but I think they are these days.
Well, and the irony of all this is that Dave Gavitt, who started that conference, you could not find a nicer, more straightforward guy who started a conference for basketball, and it morphed off into some other stuff which got football involved and all that. But then it was Mike Tranghese, who ran it, and ESPN was all involved in it, and John Swofford had an idea. And John Swofford's concept, which was the concept that they are living by now, was let's cost certainty over a period of time. Well, he signed a contract that goes through 2036. Your cost certainty is all there. That's true. But he forgot that market value could change.
Right.
And there was no contract that said in 4 or 5 years, we reevaluate what market value is. So that's how it got them stuck in there. And they ran a contract. So all these teams that are, upset about it weren't upset when they signed it.
Right.
Because they thought, oh, great, this is good. We got security. Well, you do. You know what your money's going to be. Oh, by the way, everybody else is making more, but that's your problem.
And I think that's kind of the cautionary tale is that if you were to look at which is the most not valuable, which is the healthiest of the two big programs, the Big Ten and the SEC, in my opinion, I think the Big Ten is, because they've minimized their risk by spreading it out over multiple broadcast partners. The SEC is ESPN, and ESPN is the ACC, and to a shorter extent, the ACC and the SEC they're now at the whims of this organization that's, while ESPN isn't losing money, the parent company is. They're starting to strip out features and different things to basically service two whole conferences that I'm not sure that's the way to go. In fact, if I was to build my conference up from scratch with media deals, I'd want as many partners as possible, because you're minimizing that risk. So, and they're all advertising for each other. Fox advertises, CBS advertises, whatever. And I think that's the much better business plan. But anyway,
your point is a show I did a couple of weeks ago that we'll come back and do again with you guys, and that was the consolidation is where it's going. Okay?
Right.
It has to be. You have to have consolidation. You have to have. You're going to have linear partners. You're going to have streaming.
Right.
Partners.
Yeah.
You're gonna, and the NBA is. I mean, this was a genius of David Stern. He would basically take anybody's money and give you a package. He was smart. He realized, okay, you guys want to come in, and he wasn't afraid of cable. That was one of the big things. He didn't fear being on, having playoff games on cable only.
Right.
And, everybody else was like, oh, we're not sure this is going to work. Well, guess what? It worked. And not only did it worked on an international basis. So consolidation is the only way this is going to work. we right now have, as you say, with the Big Ten, we have 3 linear partners who are broadcast networks,
Right.
and yet, Peacock with NBC Universal has 8 games that they have that they're going to, that
Right.
they're showing. And
Paramount Plus possibly in the future.
Paramount Plus
with
already
CBS.
has some games with CBS,
for
which they
CBS.
automatic
Yeah.
with CBS. The only player in that group that doesn't have a component like that is Fox, and they'll end up probably dealing with Apple or somebody down the line, where they'll become, sort of a quasi, team of sorts. And I mean, look, even CBS did it with the NCAA tournament, where they couldn't afford the tournament themselves by their
Right.
own, so they
Right.
went ahead and partnered with Turner. So, which, by the way, was a Tony Petiti, Mike Oresco deal. So
Yeah.
before they
Nice.
became conference leaders. So yeah, I mean, consolidation is it. It makes more sense, and it allows the money to be spread out, so that the money is easier to move from one to the other. And
Right.
the other thing
Yeah.
is that the cross promotion aspect is very important for everybody. So it's better to have a little piece of the pie than no pie at all.
Exactly.
And
Right.
so you'll get these, and in the conferences will get more comfortable with the streaming aspect of it. And so there'll be less pushback on that. So yeah, I think we'll come back and do a TV deal on consolidation. But no, consolidation has to happen, because you can't afford all the content that's out there that isn't college content. We're talking about NASCAR for NASCAR and IndyCar and F1. You're talking about Boomer. You and I are soccer fans. You're talking about all the English Premier League and all the other stuff that you want. That you've got the NFL has their packages are all pretty much set.
Right.
There's baseball. There's NBA, which NBC wants to get back into badly. They'll figure out a way to sell NBC a package of NBA content. And so, yeah, Discovery now is involved with, Warner Brothers. So Turner's now a Discovery, product. So all of it becomes, important to pick your partners and what are you going to do? How are we going to do this so that we all know where everything's going to be?
Right.
And I think that's the, that's the next step. And if that's, however it helps or doesn't help, advanced college sports is always going to be of value and of interest. And I think that's a good thing, but I think we're also going to have to be careful about how much of it ends up being, how much of it enters the into making sure that we get to see what we want to see. Terrence has a question. Who is the
Good one.
winner in Charter and Disney? Both.
Yep.
They
So
got,
far, it looks that way.
they pretty much got what they wanted. Charter got Disney's flagship streaming. Now that you have to be one of Charter's premier customers to get that, but they got it. And Disney got $2.7 billion, which is what they wanted. So it took them a while to get there, but they did get there. So yeah, it's not often. I mean, this is one of those things where you sit down and go, oh, what the definition of a good deal is when both people walk away thinking they
Right.
won.
Yeah.
And so this is definitely that. They both got what they wanted. Frankly, they could have probably done it in a lot faster time, but
Yeah.
that is not, unfortunately, that's just not how it works. But yeah, they got it done in time to do Monday Night Football by about 3 hours.
Charter definitely won. I think the jury is still out on Disney. We'll see what happens when all the other cable companies now start to push for similar deals. Right. Will it be a win for Disney on all of those fronts, or in aggregate, could it be a loss?
Well, this was more about the money than it was about the skinny bundle. But I mean, here's the problem: Comcast, who's bigger than Charter, is in the programming business just like Disney is. So
Right.
there's going to be, and Fox has already sold their content to Disney. So we'll see. I mean, you're right. It's going to be the next fight will be with Comcast. I don't think. I mean, but Comcast has some chips that ESPN needs, and vice versa. So we'll see how that works. There was some thought that Comcast might even buy ESPN at one point, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I don't think that makes. We'll see. I mean, look, at the end of the day, guys, broadband. These cable companies make more off of broadband than they do off of cable.
Right.
So, do they really lose? I don't really know. But you're right. Charter didn't lose anything. Charter got what they wanted.
Hey
So,
Jim, I gotta go. I'm not sure how much
so
longer you
do
wanted
so
to
do
go,
I. I was
but,
gonna thank you all.
you
So,
bet. Absolutely.
guys, it's been a lot of fun, and I know that I've had fun. I hope you
Sure.
guys have
You
had it
bet.
too.
Every
And
time.
we will. We absolutely will do this again. And thanks to Terrence and to Jerry and all the gang that came through. And I'll pay more attention to your questions next time, and we'll get more of them in. And guys, thanks very much for joining us today. And we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Enjoy yourselves. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Be safe out there, and take care.
All right.